It's January 23, 1961. The Cold War is at its peak. The world is divided into two hostile camps, the United States and the Soviet Union, both armed with thousands of nuclear warheads. One mistake, one accident, could end civilization as we know it. That night, in the skies over North Carolina, a routine flight of a B-52 bomber suddenly spiraled into one of the most terrifying moments in American history. A moment that brought the world within a hair's breadth of nuclear Armageddon. The mission was simple. A U.S. Air Force B-52 Stratofortress took off from Seymour Johnson Air Force Base, carrying two massive hydrogen bombs, each one over 250 times more powerful than the bomb dropped on Hiroshima. These bombs weren't meant to be used that night. They were part of Operation Chrome Dome, a continuous airborne alert program where American bombers patrolled the skies 24/7, ready to respond instantly if the Soviets attacked. But at 2 a.m., something went horribly wrong. The B-52 began leaking fuel. Within minutes, the situation escalated. The crew tried desperately to save the aircraft, but the massive plane quickly lost control. And then, it broke apart in the night sky. As the wreckage fell over the quiet countryside of Goldsboro, North Carolina, so too did the two hydrogen bombs. And here's the chilling part. One of them came within a single switch of detonating. This is the story of America's closest brush with self-destruction. A nuclear disaster that didn't happen, but could have changed history forever. The wreckage of the massive B-52 rained down over Goldsboro, North Carolina. It was 2 a.m., and most of the town was asleep. Families had no idea that just above their homes, a nightmare scenario was unfolding. Two hydrogen bombs, the deadliest weapons ever built at that time, were falling from the sky. Now let's pause for a moment to understand what was really at stake. Each of these Mark 39 thermonuclear bombs carried a yield of 3.8 megatons. To put that in perspective, Hiroshima's bomb was about 15 kilotons. One of these weapons was more than 250 times stronger. If it detonated, the fireball would have incinerated everything within an 8-mile radius instantly. Shock waves would flatten cities. Fallout would spread across the East Coast. From Washington, D.C. to New York City, millions of lives could have been lost within hours. This wasn't just a military accident. It was an event that could have permanently changed the history of the United States and the entire world. The fall. As the bomber disintegrated midair, the two bombs separated. One slammed into a muddy field near Faro, North Carolina. The other plummeted into a swamp, burying itself deep underground. For the people of Goldsboro, it was chaos. Witnesses described the night sky glowing red as fire consumed the falling plane. Debris was scattered across farms, homes, and roads. And somewhere in the middle of it all, two ticking doomsday devices. The Air Force quickly moved in to secure the crash site. What they discovered next is what makes this story so terrifying. The first bomb. 6 of 7 safety switches failed. When recovery teams reached the first bomb, they realized the situation was far worse than anyone could have imagined. Hydrogen bombs are designed with multiple safety mechanisms, switches, sensors, and circuits that ensure the weapon cannot detonate accidentally. But in this case, almost every safeguard had failed. Investigators later found that 6 out of 7 safety devices on the Mark 39 bomb had either malfunctioned or been destroyed in the crash. Only one tiny low-voltage switch, a single electrical component, stood between America and a nuclear explosion on its own soil. A U.S. government report years later described it chillingly. One simple dynamo technology, low-voltage switch, stood between the United States and a major catastrophe. In other words, had that switch flipped the other way, we wouldn't be talking about a close call. We'd be talking about the night the East Coast was destroyed by its own weapons. The second bomb, buried in the swamp. The second bomb plunged into a swamp and buried itself more than 100 feet underground. When recovery teams tried to retrieve it, they realized the explosive material was unreachable. They managed to recover parts of the weapon, but even today, fragments of that hydrogen bomb remain entombed beneath the North Carolina soil. Yes, that means America still has part of a live nuclear weapon buried under farmland. The human side. While the technology failed in terrifying ways, the human side of this story is just as powerful. The crew of the B-52 fought desperately to control the aircraft. Of the 8 men on board, 5 managed to eject and survive. 3 were killed in the crash. Local farmers woke up to flaming wreckage falling into their fields. Families were evacuated, terrified, not knowing if the bomb was about to explode. And yet, the public was kept largely in the dark. At the time, the government reassured citizens that there was no danger and that the weapons were safe. The truth only emerged years later through declassified documents and whistleblowers. What if it had exploded? Let's play out the scenario. If the first bomb had fully armed and detonated, a fireball would have consumed everything around Goldsboro instantly. Winds would have carried radioactive fallout north toward Washington, D.C., Baltimore, Philadelphia, and even New York City. Tens of millions could have died. Entire regions of the United States would have been uninhabitable for decades. And in the middle of the Cold War, the Soviet Union might have assumed this was an intentional American strike, triggering retaliation and possibly World War III. All because of a leaking fuel tank and a single faulty switch. The Cold War reality. The Goldsboro Incident wasn't an isolated event. Between 1950 and 1968, the U.S. military recorded at least 32 broken arrow incidents, accidents involving nuclear weapons, but none came closer to catastrophe than the night in North Carolina. It was a wake-up call, though for years, that wake-up call was kept classified. In fact, it wasn't until 2013 that official documents confirmed just how close America had come to nuclear disaster. The revelation stunned historians and the public alike. For decades, many had believed safety systems would never allow such an accident. Goldsboro proved otherwise. And so, one quiet farm town in North Carolina became the backdrop for one of history's most chilling what-if moments. A night when America nearly lost everything. Not because of war, but because of a simple accident. In the days after the crash, Goldsboro became the center of a top-secret recovery mission. The U.S. Air Force sealed off the fields, the swamps, and the wreckage. To most locals, it looked like a simple crash cleanup. Few understood the reality, that they had just stood on the edge of nuclear annihilation. Farmers recalled seeing convoys of military trucks, searchlights scanning the fields, and soldiers combing through the mud at all hours of the night. Many were never told why. Pieces of the bomber were hauled away, the bombs were quietly secured and transported, and official statements downplayed the danger. The government's message was simple. There was never a risk to the public. But behind closed doors, documents told a very different story. The cover-up. For years, details of the Goldsboro incident were classified. Even members of Congress were left in the dark. The American public was never told just how close the nation had come to catastrophe. It wasn't until decades later, when investigative journalists and declassified reports revealed the truth, that people finally understood the scale of the near disaster. One of the most shocking revelations came in 2013, when a formerly secret document was released under the Freedom of Information Act. Written by a top nuclear weapons engineer, it admitted that the bomb had come within a single low-voltage switch of detonating. This was no routine crash. This was almost the end of the East Coast. Living with a bomb beneath the soil. The second bomb, the one that buried itself deep in the swamp, was never fully recovered. The Air Force removed as much of the weapon as possible, but the uranium core was left behind, trapped underground and considered too dangerous to extract. To this day, parts of that hydrogen bomb still lie beneath North Carolina farmland. The government eventually purchased the land to keep it off limits. A quiet marker now stands near the site, acknowledging the 1961 nuclear weapons accident. For the people of Goldsboro, it's a chilling reminder. Their town almost became ground zero for the largest accidental explosion in history. The lessons learned. The Goldsboro incident forced the U.S. military to reevaluate its safety systems. Hydrogen bombs were re-engineered with more fail-safe mechanisms. Procedures for airborne alert missions were updated. Over time, programs like Operation Chrome Dome were scaled back to reduce risks. But the bigger lesson went beyond technology. It was a reminder of how fragile human safety really was in the nuclear age. All it took was a leaking fuel line and a mid-air breakup to bring a superpower within a heartbeat of destroying itself. And the haunting part? Goldsboro was not unique. There were dozens of broken arrow incidents throughout the Cold War, weapons dropped, lost at sea, or caught in fires. Each time, the world escaped disaster by luck as much as by design. A nation that never knew. Perhaps the most unsettling part of this story is how few Americans knew about it at the time. The people of Goldsboro went back to their lives. The wider nation never learned that millions had come within seconds of annihilation. For decades, the story remained buried, just like the second bomb, and when it finally came out, it raised a sobering question. How many other close calls have been hidden from history? Closing reflection. The Goldsboro Incident stands today as one of the most chilling what-if moments in American history. If not for a single low-voltage switch, the map of the United States could look very different today. Cities might be gone, millions of lives lost, the Cold War forever altered. Instead, the world moved on, never realizing how close it had come to disaster. When we think about nuclear weapons, we often imagine deliberate war, missiles fired across oceans, mushroom clouds rising from battlefields, but Goldsboro reminds us of something far scarier,
When we look back at the Goldsboro incident, it's easy to think of it as a local accident in North Carolina farmland. But the truth is, its consequences could have changed the world forever. Had those bombs exploded, the immediate impact would have been catastrophic. But the ripple effect would have been even worse. America, at the height of the Cold War, would have woken up to its own cities turned into radioactive wastelands, not by an enemy strike, but by its own arsenal. Fallout beyond borders. Nuclear fallout doesn't stop at borders. Winds would have carried radioactive dust into the Atlantic Ocean, across to Europe, even toward the Soviet Union. In a world already tense with mistrust, America could have been accused of covering up or even launching a first strike. The geopolitical fallout might have been as dangerous as the physical one. With Washington shaken, Moscow might have pushed harder, believing America was unstable. NATO alliances could have fractured under panic, and the nuclear arms race might have spiraled even faster. The silence of secrecy. But what's even more chilling is how little the public knew. For decades, the Goldsboro incident was classified. Only insiders in the Pentagon truly understood how close it had been. Ordinary citizens living just miles from disaster were never told the truth. It wasn't until the 1980s and 1990s, when documents were declassified, that historians pieced the story together. Even then, some details remain hidden. What the public learned shocked them, that their government had kept silent about a near apocalypse in their own backyard. This secrecy wasn't unique to America. Around the world, nuclear powers maintained the same policy. Accidents were covered up, risks were downplayed, and the myth of absolute safety was repeated again and again. Why the story still matters. Goldsboro isn't just a historical footnote. It's a symbol of something larger. The fragility of human survival in the nuclear age. Think about it. One single switch prevented North Carolina from becoming uninhabitable. One small piece of engineering saved millions of lives. That means our world, the world we know today, exists not because nuclear weapons are safe, but because chance favored us.
And that was the story of how the world came terrifyingly close to nuclear disaster. What do you think? Are we really safe today, or still living on borrowed time? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this video eye-opening, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe for more Untold History, and ring the bell so you never miss a story that could change how you see the world.